Let me ask you something. Have you ever really tried to build discipline? Not just that fleeting New Year's promise or the Monday morning motivation that disappears by Wednesday. I mean, the real thing, the kind of internal fire that pushes you through when you're dead tired, emotionally wrecked, or just want to disappear into your phone for 6 hours. That kind of discipline. If you've tried, chances are you've hit the wall. Repeatedly. You start strong. You set goals. You make to-do lists. You even read a few productivity books. Maybe you meditate for 2 days, sign up for a gym membership, or go all in on a new habit tracker app. And then you crack. Maybe not all at once. Maybe just a small skip, a missed workout, a late night binge, a snoozed alarm. But the cracks widen. And soon enough, you're back to square one. Again, it feels like self-sabotage. And you're not wrong. Here's the truth. Most people don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because they don't understand themselves. They build discipline like it's a surface-level skill, like time management or habit stacking, when in reality, discipline is deeply psychological. It's not just about willpower. It's about what's lurking in your unconscious mind. And this is where Carl Jung comes in. Now, before we dive into these 5 psychological laws, let's make sure we understand the guy we're borrowing them from. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just a psychologist. He was an explorer of the human soul. He didn't want to just treat symptoms. He wanted to know why humans act the way they do, especially when they don't want to. He spent his life diving into the parts of ourselves we ignore, repress, or are too afraid to look at. The unconscious, the shadow, archetypes, individuation. These were his playgrounds. Jung believed that most of what we do, our patterns, our addictions, our self-sabotage, is driven by parts of us we don't even know exist. And that if we don't face these parts, we will forever be trapped by them. Like puppets yanked by invisible strings. Want to build unbreakable discipline? Then we have to go down there, into the roots. Let's talk about this shadow for a second, because it's the key to the entire game. Jung defined the shadow as the unconscious part of your personality that contains everything you've rejected, denied, or hidden. Your fears, your rage, your laziness, your envy, your secret desires. All the stuff you were told as a kid was bad or unacceptable. You didn't kill it. You buried it. But here's the kicker. The shadow doesn't stay quiet. It leaks. It whispers. It seduces. It sabotages. That's why you say you want to get in shape, but keep skipping workouts. That's why you want to wake up at 5 a.m., but hit snooze 6 times. That's why you want to focus, but reach for TikTok every 3 minutes. It's not because you're weak. It's because there's a battle inside you, and the shadow is winning. You can't fight what you won't face. Here's the shift. Discipline doesn't come from controlling your shadow. It comes from understanding and integrating it. Jung wasn't a fan of repression. He didn't believe in stuffing down desires and pretending they weren't there. He believed in bringing them into the light, looking at them honestly, and figuring out how they could serve you, not sabotage you. Let that sink in for a moment. The part of you that's wrecking your progress, it's not evil. It's misunderstood. And it's powerful. Real, long-lasting discipline isn't about white-knuckling your way through life. It's about becoming a whole person, owning your dark side, using it as fuel. 1. The law of the shadow, the enemy within. You know what's funny? Most people think discipline is about pushing harder. Like if you just grind more, suffer more, hustle harder, you'll get what you want. Wake up earlier, make the to-do list, cut out distractions, boom, success. But here's the thing no one tells you. The reason you keep falling off track probably has nothing to do with effort. It has to do with the part of you that you don't even want to admit exists. The one that keeps pulling you back just when you think you're finally getting somewhere. Carl Jung called that part the shadow. And yeah, it sounds mysterious or dramatic, but it's actually pretty simple. The shadow is everything in you that you've rejected, denied, or tried to hide. Your anger, your laziness, your fear, your desire to just check out and avoid life. But also, weirdly enough, your ambition, your strength, your boldness, if those things weren't accepted when you were younger or if they threatened your environment somehow. They got shoved into the same dark basement. Now here's the real mind bender. That part of you doesn't go away. It waits, it watches, and it acts, just not directly. It shows up in ways that feel almost random. You skip a workout for no reason. You scroll TikTok for 3 hours knowing it's messing with your sleep. You blow off your goals and tell yourself it's just one bad day. But it's not random. The shadow is playing out behind the scenes. The problem is we're taught to fight that side of ourselves. Discipline, we're told, means crushing the weak part of you, kicking laziness in the face, beating procrastination like it's a monster. But Jung warned us that whatever we repress doesn't die. It just gets stronger. The more you fight the shadow, the more it controls you. And the more energy you waste trying to suppress it, the less you have for the things you actually want to do. So here's the shift. Real discipline doesn't come from fighting the shadow. It comes from understanding it, listening to it, integrating it. That means recognizing that your so-called laziness might be something deeper, burnout, maybe, or fear of failure. That your anger might actually be part of you that's sick of being pushed around, tired of holding everything in. And the part of you that just wants to lie in bed all day, maybe it's a signal that you've been hustling for the wrong reasons. It's uncomfortable to admit this stuff, sure. We all want to think we're purely rational and in control, but the truth is, most of our behavior is driven by things we don't even realize are operating in the background. Until you make the unconscious conscious, as Jung said, it will control your life and you will call it fate. What does this mean practically? It means instead of just forcing yourself to push harder when discipline slips, you stop and ask, what part of me is doing this? What does it want? What is it afraid of? You get curious instead of judgmental. You write it down. You sit with it. You name it. Some people even give their shadow a character, like the saboteur or the inner critic. It sounds silly, but once you name it, it stops running the show in secret. And here's the beautiful part. Once you start seeing your shadow clearly, you realize that a lot of its energy isn't bad. It's just misdirected. The part of you that's impulsive, that's raw power. The part that wants to quit, that's honest emotion. The trick is learning to work with it, not against it. So instead of saying, I'm lazy, you might realize I'm overwhelmed because I keep saying yes to things I don't actually care about. Instead of thinking, I have no willpower, you might discover, I'm using all my willpower trying to be someone I'm not. That's what integration looks like. It's not about perfection. It's about honesty. And once you start doing that, discipline becomes less about force and more about alignment. You don't have to drag yourself forward every day because you're not constantly wrestling with some hidden force pulling you in the other direction. You've faced that part of you. You made peace with it. And now it walks with you. This is the first real step to lasting discipline. Not more control, more understanding. You're not broken. You're just divided. But now you're starting to bring those pieces back together. Next, we go deeper into the law of projection, because sometimes the things that bother you the most in other people are the exact things you're hiding from yourself. 2. The law of projection, what you hate in others' lives in you. It's weird how certain people just get under your skin, right? They walk into a room, say one thing, and instantly your whole nervous system flares up. You roll your eyes, you feel tight in your chest, you want to argue or escape. And you don't always know why. You just can't stand them. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Jung said that what irritates you in others often points straight to something unresolved in you. That's the essence of the law of projection. We don't just see other people as they are. We see them through the lens of our own unconscious mind. So when someone triggers you, especially if your reaction feels bigger than the situation, there's a good chance they're reflecting something you haven't accepted in yourself. Let that sink in for a second. The guy who's always bragging? Maybe he's showing you the confidence you don't feel safe expressing. The woman who always has everything together? Maybe she reminds you of how chaotic you feel inside. The lazy coworker you can't stop judging? Maybe he mirrors the part of you that secretly wishes you could just slow down for 5 minutes and stop pretending to have it all under control. That's the uncomfortable truth. The things we attack in others often live in our own shadow. Projection isn't something we do consciously. It's automatic. It's like the mind saying, I can't deal with this part of me, so I'll just assign it to that guy over there. It's a defense mechanism meant to protect our self-image. But the cost? We never get to face the real issue. We stay trapped in judgment, in blame, in this illusion that the problem is always out there. And this directly affects your ability to build discipline. Why? Because as long as you're projecting your inner conflicts onto other people, you're not owning them. You're outsourcing your responsibility. You're saying, I can't focus because everyone around me is so distracting. Or, I can't stick to my goals because I'm surrounded by lazy people. Or even, I can't trust myself to grow because I always get pulled down by toxic energy. But in reality, those things often reflect something happening inside you. A part of you that doesn't want to be responsible. A part that doesn't want to be seen failing. A part that's terrified of stepping into real accountability. The truth is, once you stop blaming and start owning, your inner world begins to shift. You stop wasting energy on resentment. You stop reacting so much. You gain a kind of quiet power, not because you've fixed everything, but because you've started telling yourself the truth. One of the most powerful things you can do is pay attention to the people who trigger you. Not to judge them more, but to ask, what part of me do they reflect? It's not always literal. If someone is arrogant and it drives you nuts, it doesn't mean you're arrogant. It might mean you were taught that confidence was dangerous or prideful or selfish. So now you reject it in others because deep down, you've rejected it in yourself. Here's where this gets useful. Instead of just reacting emotionally, you turn your reactions into mirrors. You use them as a way to understand what's been buried. And once you start seeing those projections clearly, they lose their grip on you. You become less reactive, less judgmental, and, most importantly, more whole. Let me give you a real example. A guy I worked with couldn't stand people who were slow. Slow drivers, slow speakers, slow decision makers. They all drove him nuts. But when we looked closer, it turned out he had grown up in a household where any kind of slowness was shamed. Being fast meant being smart. Being fast meant being respected. So his hatred of slow people wasn't about them. It was about the fear that if he ever slowed down, he'd lose his worth. Once he saw that, something clicked. He didn't magically become calm overnight, but he started noticing his patterns. And he realized that slowing down wasn't weakness. It was actually something his nervous system had been craving for years. That insight helped him rebuild his daily habits from the inside out. He started making space. He started choosing calm over chaos. And his discipline got stronger, not because he was pushing harder, but because he was finally moving from a place of alignment. This is what Jung meant when he said that making the unconscious conscious is the key to transformation. As long as you're blind to your projections, they rule you. But when you start seeing them for what they are, your own disowned traits, they become tools for growth. So if you really want unbreakable discipline, pay close attention to what you resist in others. That's usually your next lesson. Not because those people are right, but because they're showing you where your attention needs to go. And once you stop wasting energy pushing those parts of yourself away, you can start using that energy to build something real. Discipline, then, isn't about cleaning up your external world first. It's about cleaning your lens, clearing the projections, taking responsibility for your inner dialogue, and seeing reality as it is, not as your past paints it. And when you start doing that, you stop getting distracted by surface-level triggers. You stop outsourcing blame. And suddenly, you're left with just you, the real you, without the filters. That's where the work begins. 3. The law of archetypes, the story you're stuck in. You ever get this strange feeling that you're living the same day over and over? Not literally, but emotionally. Like you keep repeating the same type of mistake, or you always end up in the same mood, or fall into the same trap, even when you know better. It's like something deeper is pulling the strings, something older than just habits or environment, something that feels scripted. Jung believed we're all living out stories, deep, ancient ones. And not just because we like storytelling, but because we are storytelling creatures. At the center of that idea are archetypes, universal patterns that shape how we think, act, love, fight, fall apart, and try to put ourselves back together. And here's the thing. The archetype that's dominating you will directly shape your discipline. Not because of willpower, but because of identity. Discipline isn't just what you do. It's who you think you are while you're doing it. Let me explain. Every archetype comes with a script, a built-in worldview. The hero fights against odds. The orphan feels abandoned. The warrior seeks control. The martyr sacrifices. The lover longs for connection. The sage watches. And each of these shows up in different ways in our life, depending on where we are, how we were raised, what we've suppressed, and what we're secretly chasing. For example, if you're unconsciously stuck in the victim archetype, you're going to have a hard time sticking to any plan. Not because you're lazy, but because deep down you believe life is happening to you. So when things get hard, the story kicks in. See, nothing ever works out for me. And just like that, the discipline collapses. But it doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like confirming the story you already believe. On the other hand, if the performer archetype is dominating your life, discipline becomes all about image. You do things not because they matter to you, but because they'll look good. And yeah, that can work for a while. You might hit your goals, build a body, get the degree. But eventually, that archetype burns out. Why? Because it feeds on validation, not meaning. And discipline without meaning is a dead engine. You can only fake it for so long before your insides revolt. But when you start to see the archetypes operating in your life, not just as ideas, but as actual drivers, everything shifts. Suddenly it's not, why do I keep failing? It becomes, I'm stuck in the pattern of the martyr again. Giving too much, burning out, expecting someone to save me. Or, I'm trapped in the warrior right now. Everything feels like a battle. No wonder I'm exhausted. And here's the twist. No archetype is bad. Every one of them has light and shadow. The hero is brave, but can also be blind to nuance. The sage is wise, but can become detached from life. The rebel sparks change, but can also destroy everything just to feel alive. It's not about fixing your archetype. It's about becoming conscious of which one is running the show, and then learning how to shift when needed. So how does this tie into discipline? Let me show you. Most people try to build discipline by changing their actions. But those actions are being generated by a deeper identity, a character you're playing, usually without realizing it. If you try to force yourself into a consistent routine, but you're living from the mindset of the orphan who doesn't believe anyone has your back, you're going to subconsciously self-sabotage. Why? Because structure feels foreign. Support feels unsafe. And deep down, there's a story that says, this won't last. But once you recognize the story, you can rewrite it. You can shift archetypes. You can say, okay, I've been living as the victim. What would it look like to step into the creator instead? The creator doesn't wait. The creator builds. The creator sees challenge as raw material. That mental shift alone is often more powerful than any productivity app or time blocking system. Let's make this real. Say you want to wake up early and stick to a morning routine. You set the alarm. You plan your day. You even get hyped about it. But then comes the moment. Alarm goes off, and your hand slaps the snooze button like it's life or death. You go back to sleep. Again, most people blame willpower. But what if it's not about that? What if your inner archetype doesn't believe in the version of you who wakes up early and leads their life on purpose? If your dominant inner character is the escapist, of course you'll avoid discipline. Because the story that archetype believes is, the world is too much. I need to hide. No routine stands a chance until that script is rewritten. That's the power of the law of archetypes. It tells us that until you know which story you're in, you can't write a new ending. You can hustle all you want, but if your unconscious is still stuck in an old role, one that fears responsibility or rejects success or secretly craves chaos, you'll keep finding ways to circle back to the beginning. So here's a practical takeaway. Start paying attention to the tone of your inner dialogue. Is it heroic, defensive, hopeless, calculating, desperate? Each of these voices points to an archetype at play. And once you start recognizing them, you gain a kind of inner freedom. You don't have to become any one of them. You can choose. That's when discipline becomes sustainable. Not because you're faking it, but because you're finally aligned with a version of yourself that actually wants to grow. 4. The law of inner opposition, the battle you can't avoid. Let's just say it straight. The idea that one day you'll wake up and be fully motivated is a lie. That one day the resistance will be gone, everything will flow, and you'll finally become that version of yourself who just does the work effortlessly. No, that version doesn't exist because the resistance, it never leaves. And Jung would say, it's not supposed to. Here's the thing nobody likes to admit. The parts of you that resist your goals aren't trying to ruin your life. They're trying to protect you from risk, from shame, from change, from the unknown. They're doing their job, just not in a way that lines up with what you consciously want. Jung called this inner opposition the counterforce. It's that voice that kicks in right after you decide to commit. You're really going to wake up at 5 a.m.? It whispers. You're not that type of person. Or start writing that book? Who do you think you are? That voice is subtle. Sometimes it sounds like logic. Sometimes like sarcasm. Sometimes it just feels like this sudden wave of exhaustion or boredom out of nowhere. But it's all coming from the same place, deep inner conflict. And here's where it gets interesting. The harder you try to suppress that resistance, the louder it gets. Because the unconscious doesn't like being ignored. It fights back. If your conscious mind is the CEO trying to run the show, the unconscious is the entire staff behind the scenes. If they don't believe in the mission, nothing gets done. So most people live in this tug of war. One part wants growth, and the other just wants to feel safe. One part dreams big, the other whispers, let's not make a scene. And what happens? Stuckness, frustration, self-sabotage that feels like bad luck. But it's not bad luck, it's inner opposition. And that force needs more than brute strength to overcome it. It needs respect. See, discipline isn't built by killing off the parts of you that resist. It's built by listening to them, making space for them, even negotiating with them. I know that sounds soft, but think about it. When has beating yourself up ever worked long term? When has shame led to sustainable change? Exactly. The stronger path, the more disciplined path, is actually the one where you make a real relationship with your resistance. That starts by asking, what is this part of me trying to protect? For example, maybe you can't seem to commit to a workout routine. You think you're just lazy. But when you dig deeper, you remember being mocked as a kid during gym class. You learn that moving your body equals humiliation. So now, every time you try to get back into shape, your unconscious slams the brakes. Not to ruin your life, to keep you safe. Or maybe you keep blowing off your creative projects. You tell yourself you're undisciplined. But underneath, there's a voice terrified that if you actually finish something, people might see it and judge it. That fear is ancient. And your unconscious has no idea you're not still 8 years old. This is why inner work isn't a luxury. It's essential, because until you deal with the roots of your resistance, you'll keep treating symptoms and calling it discipline. You'll keep pushing forward until something snaps, and then blame yourself. But if you stop and get curious, if you invite that inner voice to speak instead of just trying to shut it up, that's where things shift. You realize resistance isn't the enemy. It's the doorway. Once you start having that dialogue with yourself, everything changes. You can say, okay, part of me is scared. That's fine. I don't need to fight it. I just need to lead it. You become the inner adult, the conscious calm center, the one who hears the fear but still shows up anyway. And showing up, even with fear, even with doubt, is what real discipline looks like. It's not about removing resistance. It's about walking with it. It's about noticing when that part of you wants to run and saying, I see you. I know you're scared, but we're doing this anyway. Together. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Because once you accept that the inner battle never fully goes away, you stop wasting energy trying to defeat it. And you start using that energy to move forward. Messily, imperfectly, but honestly. That's when you become dangerous. Not because you're flawless, but because you're no longer divided against yourself. You've made peace with the parts of you that used to trip you up, and now they walk beside you. So you've seen the shadow. You've watched your projections at work. You've met the archetypes that live in you. You've felt the resistance. And maybe for the first time, you've realized that your so-called lack of discipline was never laziness. It was fragmentation. A soul split into parts. A war inside. And now, it's time to stop fighting and start integrating. Integration means this: taking all the inner truths you've discovered and letting them shape the way you live. Not just knowing them, not just talking about them, but embodying them, making your insights so real. They show up in your posture, your tone of voice, your calendar, your habits, your energy. It's the difference between a person who says, "Yeah, I know I need to change," and the one who moves differently because they are different. And here's the most important thing you'll read in this whole book. Discipline is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more you, the you that was buried under trauma, fear, and noise. All that time you thought you were failing, you weren't. You were protecting yourself from pressure, from judgment, for not being enough, for being too much. And that's okay. Truly, forgive yourself for the detours, because now you see it clearly. Now you can move forward from truth. But don't expect it to be clean. Integration is messy. You'll have days where the old patterns sneak back in. You'll snap at yourself, fall off track, numb out with distractions. That's not failure. That's contact. You're brushing up against the parts that were never loved. And every time you stay with yourself in that moment instead of abandoning or shaming, you are building real discipline. Because real discipline isn't about perfect routines or unbreakable streaks. It's about staying with yourself when it's hard. It's saying, "I didn't hit my mark today, but I'm still on my side." It's waking up tired, uninspired, and still showing up with whatever you've got, not to prove anything, but because you're becoming someone you actually trust. That's the shift. Discipline stops being a punishment and becomes a relationship. With yourself, with your time, with your values. So how do you live this? You start small, radically small. Forget overhauling your entire life in a weekend. That's the old archetype talking, the savior or the hero trying to fix everything. Instead, ask, what's one thing I can show up for today that aligns with who I'm becoming? One honest conversation, 1 hour of deep work, one walk without your phone, one boundary you keep, one thing you do even when your inner critic screams that it doesn't matter. And you stack that, day after day, not to impress anyone, but to prove to yourself, I can trust me. You'll fail. Of course you will. But every failure becomes feedback, not evidence that you're broken, but proof that you're in the game. And here's where the deeper work continues. Keep noticing your shadow. When you slip, ask, what part of me just hijacked the wheel? Was it fear? Was it the orphan? The critic? The rebel? The perfectionist? Don't banish them. Talk to them. Invite them into consciousness. Say, hey, I see you. What are you afraid of? What do you need from me? You keep doing that day by day, and slowly, beautifully, those fractured parts begin to trust you. They soften, they integrate, and your actions stop coming from reaction and start coming from alignment. That's when discipline becomes unbreakable. Not because you're rigid, but because you're whole. You're not hustling to prove your worth. You're acting from your worth. You're not forcing yourself to be someone new. You're remembering who you were before fear started editing the script. And that's the most powerful force in the world. So go, not to start a grind era, but to start living from center. Let the Jungian truths echo in your day-to-day. What you resist persists. What you bring into consciousness transforms. And what you integrate liberates. You don't need a perfect morning routine. You need self-respect. You don't need to be motivated. You need to be honest. You don't need to control everything. You need to listen to yourself until you no longer need to escape. That's the way, not the fast way, the real one. Discipline then is no longer a mask. It's your truest face, finally returned to you.